Yeah. So Brian Kelly going to LSU. Talk about your odd couple situation. I know it's been a couple years now for you guys to digest it. How is he doing down there? And again, the issue with the defense. How long? Let's assuming worst case scenario, if they don't get the defense sorted out. How long of a leash does he have down there?
He's got like a $70 million leash. He ain't going nowhere, man. For better or worse, LSU and Brian Kelly are financially woven together for the duration of his contract. They gave him a 10-year deal, where he is owed 90% of the remaining amount of his contract if they fire him. So I think after this year, if they were to fire him, it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $68 million, and that's just never going to happen here ever. So they are pot committed, and Kelly is here for the duration. So that sort of answers that question. As far as how he's assimilated, guys, I know that Louisiana, and in particular the southern part of this state, is so culturally different from everywhere else, even in the South, right? I mean, there's the Cajun and Creole culture here. We spell things funny and we eat things that look funny, and I get it. But more than anything, people here want two things. They want you to embrace the culture, and they want you to win. And I've pointed this out for as long as people have asked me this question. As you can imagine, I get that a lot. The winningest coach in the history of LSU athletics is Skip Bertman, the baseball coach who won 5 national titles here. Skip Bertman is a Jewish guy who was born in Detroit and grew up in Miami. Like, Louisiana is very heavily Catholic. Dale Brown was the winningest basketball coach, and when he retired, he was second only to Adolph Rupp in the history of the SEC. Dale Brown was from Minot, North Dakota. The winningest football coach, most successful football coach here was Nick Saban, who was a Midwesterner, was from West Virginia, and spent most of his career in the Midwest. It don't matter if you know how to spell Chifuncta or andouille or you like gumbo. You just got to embrace the culture here, and you have to win. And if you do that, the people here will love you forever. They will embrace you. Like, if it's a weird thing here where we know we're different, but we love that we're different. Not for the sake of being different, because it's the culture that we all grew up in. And if you embrace it, man, we'll wrap our arms around you and love you forever. That's why people like Drew Brees, who have come here, stay when they could go anywhere in the world, because it becomes part of you if you let it. And I think Brian Kelly and his family have done a great job of that, man. And most importantly, he's won games. He's won games too. So yeah, I think Brian Kelly's done fine.
So I'm going to ask you a question, Matt, off of what you just said, that I don't think anyone would anticipate me asking this question, but why were you able to cut through all that and maintain that broadcasting diction and non-dialect?
Mark, you and I have known each other long enough, man. I don't really have an accent, do I? I mean, yeah, if you go about 40 miles south of where I am, you'd have a lot of people that talk like Coach O, for example. But yeah, I mean, y'all love Coach O, but nah, man. I grew up in it, man. It's. I look at it and go, man, how do you not know how to spell etouffee and andouille and chifuncta and chapatulas?
So expectations, is it simply meet the 12-team playoff, get there, and that's a successful season regardless of what happens in the playoff? Miss the 12-team playoff, bad season.
Yeah, if they miss, I think, tell me if you guys disagree with this, because I'm curious how the conversation goes across different leagues, and y'all are looking at it through a different prism now, obviously with the Big Ten. But the consensus here is the SEC is gonna get 2 for sure, and probably 3 in most every year. In a really, really odd, one-off, strange scenario, you might get 4. And you can go look at final rankings throughout the past, decade, 2 decades, and see that pretty much pans out. I don't know what that might look like in the Big Ten, and especially now with an expanded Big Ten. But I think the general feeling here is you got to be 10-2. If you're 10-2, you're going to get in the SEC. You're going to get in a 12-team playoff. Here's the odd thing. Everyone sort of roundly agrees Georgia and Texas are going to be in. Like, their schedules shape out, their rosters are great. Those 2 teams, if they're not there, something went terribly, terribly wrong. So really what you have then is this clump of LSU, Bama, Ole Miss, Missouri, Tennessee, these 5 teams that are probably all vying for one spot. And so I think that group of 5 teams, one fan base is going to be really happy, and the other 4 are really not. So if you're LSU, you can look at it and say, well, you get Ole Miss and Bama at home, and Vanderbilt rotates on the schedule, so that's always a plus. So maybe for LSU, it's that year where they're the team that goes 10-2 and makes it in the playoff. And if that's the case, then I think people will look and say, all right, that's another step of progress under Brian Kelly. Another 9-3 season is going to probably feel like you're just like, are you bumping up against the glass ceiling? You know, how do you break through? And that sort of perpetual state of mediocrity is a terrible place to be, because you're close enough that you feel like you can taste it, but you're far enough away to where, is it actually a reality? So, you know, that's when you kind of start to have to make real decisions about culture and direction of the program, et cetera. So, Mark, I don't know if I really answered your question, man, but I think 10-2, if they don't get to 10-2 this year, I mean, that means you probably lost to Bama, you probably lost to Ole Miss, and then you dropped another one somewhere else that you probably weren't expecting to drop. And I think people would be real disappointed if that happened.
I have not seen the magazine, but apparently Lindy's is predicting 5 SEC teams in the playoffs.
I think that's crazy. That's just math, guys. I don't know how, you know, and look, I'll be at SEC Media Days in a few weeks, and I'll see Lindy there, and I'll see Lynn Scarborough, who are good friends of mine. I can't imagine how does the math work that 5 SEC teams, 5 teams from any league would get into a playoff?
The only way I can think of it is because I've seen it in the Pac-12, is if the Big Ten beat the crap out of itself. Meaning, and there's got to be some and there's got to be, actually on top of that, you have to have some out of conference losses. But I don't know if you can get the only problem is if the Big Ten only got one team in, because again, the top teams all beat up on each other.
If it can, but guys, that's the kind of thing where I'm saying, I think if a league cannibalizes itself, that might open the door in a weird one-off to get 4. And guys, just think of it like Bama and Tennessee play each other. Bama and Ole Miss play each other. LSU and Ole Miss play each other. LSU and Bama play each other. You know, a lot of those teams we're talking about that are in that group of 5, like, they're all going to play each other. So I think what's going to happen is you'll have your top 2, which I think we're all expecting to be Georgia, Texas. And then the process of elimination is going to come based on the head-to-head matchups in that group that we talked about. I mean, I'm confident saying the SEC will get 3. Man, beyond that, it just really feels like it's going to take a weird scenario to unfold to get 4. 5 feels like, I would have to see the math, how that all plays out. I don't know how you'd get to 5 from one league.
Well, Matt,
this is what I was going to ask about, and it really flows into the conversation that we're having right now. And that is that, you know, if you lose 2 games, you get in. And so I think part of that forecast is that Lindy's thinks that there are going to be a lot of 10-2 teams. So like they're going to bump each other, but only twice. Like there's going to be that even distribution, right? It's like how you get NCAA tournament bids. You balance the wins and losses in your conference just enough to spread the wealth around. My question is, you know, the SEC is still at 8 league games this year, and that might also be a factor. The SEC is playing 8, the Big Ten is playing 9. So that could also be a reason. And I want to get your thoughts on that. That, you know, the SEC held out for another year with 8. What is the view among the LSU community, but also in the wider SEC community, in terms of playing 8 versus 9? Because when Texas and Oklahoma, it was announced that they would join the SEC, I thought, slam dunk, they're going to 9. It's going to happen right away. It didn't. So how are people viewing the 8 versus 9 conversation in the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, I've had this conversation with Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, seemingly every year at media days when we sit down. And I mean, there's a couple of factors. Number one, if you go from 8 to 9, you are guaranteeing half of your league another loss, right? you're guaranteeing another loss to half of your league. So without the playoff expansion, there was no shot. They were not going to 9 because you weren't going to cut off your nose to spite your face. The other key component was TV. So if the SEC expanded and went to 9 league games, they're adding league inventory for their TV partners. Well, the contract is structured such that if in the event of expansion or changes in the schedule, the two sides would come together in good faith and renegotiate the deal. Well, ESPN, which just agreed to a massive deal with the SEC, wasn't clearly willing to renegotiate and pay more for more SEC inventory. So the league is saying, well, we're not just going to give you more league inventory without being compensated for it. Like, we're not going to facilitate another weekend of conference games without the financial benefit, which is prudent. And I get it. So, but I also think, guys, like, that's the inherent problem with college football. The fact that we don't just have a schedule where everybody plays 11 or 12 Power 5 or Power 4 games, and schedules are equitable, and you play it out, and you have a fair playoff structure that allows people to lose a game because you're giving the fans a great game in the regular season and still make it in. You know, teams are allowed to get better as the season goes along. Like, there's no rule against getting better from week 1 to week 12. So, like, I'm pumped that LSU and NSC are playing. Like, I saw the story about Lincoln Riley, saying, "Oh, he's trying to get out of the LSU game." Hell, I don't blame him. I mean, you're going into the Big Ten. You have a 9-game league schedule. You got LSU and Notre Dame. So you got one breather of a game. Like, you're not playing an equitable schedule, and you're at a place that has tremendous expectation. And I mean, I get it. But think about how, like, backwards that is as football fans. We're sitting here in June and talking about a game in September because people are excited about it. And one of the coaches was saying, "I don't know if it's worth playing that game." Well, like, it's just the wrong way of. I'm not saying, like, he's wrong for thinking that way. He's got to protect his team, his program, their opportunity to play into a postseason. But in so doing, you'd be robbing fans of a great game that everybody's excited to see. So that's why I hope, man, we eventually. So you just wound me up and set me off on something that's like a huge pet peeve of mine. Like, this is a major passion point for me. It's like, we have got to get to a point where we stop seeing LSU against Nichols ever. Like, it is not the Power Four's job to fund the Group of 5. Nobody wants to see those games ever. You give me 11 or 12 games of power teams against each other that's fair and equitable across the country, where we can see great games across every weekend. It's such an abomination that I sit there and watch the SEC in the second to last week in November, and everybody's playing FCS schools. Like, what are we doing? So that's – I don't even know why I started on this. I don't know why y'all sent me down this path, but whatever. I started going, and that's my point. I don't know what my point was.
It's all part of a larger whole.
Play better games and stop with the crap games nobody wants to see.